So thanks for giving me the chance to share our story. And today I would like to share Aprecia's journey on three-dimensional printing and how it looks at additive manufacturing as a way to, I guess, tackle the unmet challenges in pharmaceutical industry. And you really start with the fundamental objective that really underlies manufacture or any endeavor that really seeks to address needs of patients, pharmaceutical scientists, clinicians, pharmacists, and payers. That's really the simple concept of matching supply with demand. It's a simple concept, but really eludes many of us. And it's also deceptively difficult to pull off well. One great example that everybody is really keenly aware of is COVID-19 vaccine challenges. And you really start with understanding the demand and the demand pattern of what's needed, when, and for whom. And then you can really start constructing your best way to supply the goods and services to match those demands. The supply can include raw materials, intermediates, equipment, processes, procedures, labor, and controls, and so on. And you want to have all those things in the right place at the right time. And when you actually talk about the location, one way to really look at the manufacturing location choices is really by looking at the distance from the patient. So here's a quick schematic that shows you how far you are manufacturing the product away from the patient. And as you move away from the patient, a lot of different things happen. For example, the number of machines that you need decreases as you go to a centralized manufacturing model, and also the number of batches that you need to make also decreases. And you get closer and closer to getting to the patient, the number really skyrockets. If you're imagining every patient having an access to a machine, then you're actually talking about millions of machines and millions of supplies to be presented to those patients. So it's a very challenging decision to make. And also some aspects of the dosage for manufacture will respond in the totally opposite direction. And this schematic actually shows you some of those examples, including the complexity of the operation that can be tolerated, and the skilled labor that's available to properly execute those instructions. And the batch size can increase, the footprint of a machine usually increases, and the throughput that's needed to adequately supply the medicine also tends to increase. And these are the types of trade-offs that need to be carefully balanced and addressed to make the right choice for manufacturing location. And it's also important to recognize that there are some invariants, and no matter where a dosage form is assembled, the quality needs to be assured. And also the safety of the patients, caregivers, and those who manufacture them, those are not optional. And speed is also an important one to remember that doesn't really change much. People often mistake that speed as being not as important when patients or pharmacists are expected to make the dosage forms. But for example, pharmacists are incredibly sensitive to time-consuming tasks. And also patients that are used to getting their prescriptions for 1 month's supply in 10 minutes may grow very impatient if they have to wait 10 minutes to just set up a machine to get one tablet. And similarly, also the costs matter. So the overall solution that's enabled by three-dimensional printing or any other innovation really needs to look at the costs and the benefit that's being provided to be a successful product. And having said all those, Aprecia started from and is currently operating with the centralized manufacturing mode. And what we manufacture is a product called Spritam. Many of you may be already aware, but it's a rapidly dispersing dosage form that's provided in 4 different strengths. Same as another product called Keppra, that is the reference listed product. And these are really designed for patients that have difficulty swallowing large tablets or difficulty swallowing any tablets. And when you have dosage forms that have such high active content, such as the Spritam with 250, 500, 750, and 1000 milligrams, it really becomes a necessity for some patients to have this kind of a dosage form so that they can actually be compliant with the therapy that they're assigned to control their symptoms. And much of Aprecia's experience has been really focused around centrally manufacturing the types of dosage forms that are unique and cannot be made using other techniques. So this is an example of addressing an unmet need for patients. Here's how we make our dosage forms. We use binder jetting technique, so combining powder and liquid by inkjet printing. Previous to Aprecia solved the throughput challenge, the state-of-the-art binder jetting techniques used to be able to make maybe 100 tens of units or 100 units per hour. And we had to actually find a way to drastically increase that throughput. And what we ended up doing is to make a machine that can continuously operate, continuously spreading powder and continuously printing onto that powder layer by presenting a continuous train of build platforms. And that's arranged in a circular loop. This reorganization of the binder jetting elements allowed us to get to tens of thousands of units per hour. And here are a couple of photos of our scaled up machine. So machine 0 that's shown on the left side, it initially demonstrated the effectiveness of this racetrack configuration, and that has 12 pallets in a contiguous motion. And Spritam was actually initially developed and launched on machine 0. And then Aprecia further invested in machine 1, shown on the right. That has 16 pallets and a print area that's twice as wide as machine 0. And that's where Spritam is produced today. So this scale up, automation, and building and commissioning of a new plant and tech transfer between sites and machines, and then commercial production and validation preceding that commercial production, and periodic FDA inspection. Those have all been part of the operations since the launch. And these are the types of activities that do not really make headlines, but they're very important hallmarks of a kind of a maturation process that's needed to really solidify three-dimensional printing and its place in pharmaceutical manufacturing. I want to actually get to a little bit of a detail on some of the issues that we spent some time looking through and solved. In our process, there is some unbound powder between dosage forms, and that powder is captured and then fed back into the system following a process called harvesting. And the question that we had was, how does that recirculation of that powder impact the product quality? And what we ended up doing is to really use the data-driven approach to generate the deep process understanding. And here's an example of what we ended up doing. So in large batches that span tens or hundreds of kilos of material, we've actually monitored the weights of the dosage forms throughout that batch, and then looked at it through the lens of recirculation. So you break it into different segments where you might have had some powder that have gone through the process once, twice, 3 times, or 4 times, and so on. And then look at those different segments of that process and see if you see any signal of a change. And what we were able to do is to confirm that the product quality is adequately maintained throughout that process. And we've actually done this with regular size batches as well as some extended batches beyond our normal batch size to confirm that the recirculation has no impact on the product quality. And we did that with the weight uniformity of the dosage forms, and then also looked at the label claim of those dosage forms. Also look at the physical characteristics by looking at the tablet breaking force and other characteristics. And finally, also check the uniformity of the dosage units. This is the content uniformity data that's shown here to just make sure that what we are doing with the process is not going to give us any kind of an unexpected shift or trending in the products that we are making. And we were adequately satisfied and were able to also convince the regulators that the process is robust and reliable enough to make the product. And this was really the central theme around manufacturing with machine 0 and machine 1, basically showing that the process is capable and is reliable enough to make dosage forms on a day-to-day basis. Once we actually solved the scale issue, we also looked at scaling down for really making our product development process a bit more robust and really enabling more of the products to be developed in our pipeline. What we ended up doing is to design a machine that's called a slider. It features some of the common elements and operating principles as a machine 1, including identical build beds. And this ended up serving us as a platform to develop pipeline products, as well as to also present an option for commercially manufacturing small volume products, such as in rare disease cases. And it really ended up backfilling the development needs with a smaller machine that's more material sparing. And we actually continue to further scale down with a machine called a bed-to-bed machine. Once again, the operating principles are maintained for the most part, but with a smaller bed and a smaller print head and easier to swap out components of the machine. We ended up making the early development phase of the pipeline to be much more efficient and allowed changeover between different compounds so that you can actually share the machine throughout the development cycle. What we've seen is that from scaling up and then towards scaling down towards a slider and bed-to-bed machine, you really need to have a complete toolbox of different scale machines to really handle the different phases of the development cycle. And we continue to actually think about, are we sufficiently scaled down? And we've actually looked at different approaches to make the dosage forms at even smaller scales. What we ended up arriving at is a process called in-cavity printing. So in this animation, you'll basically see how it works. It starts with a preformed cavity, such as a blister card. And then we basically build individual dosage forms inside of those, first by printing onto the into the cavity, and then depositing a metered amount of powder into it, and then leveling it, and then printing again on top of it. and then repeating this process layer by layer. So it's a very similar concept to the binder jetting, but it basically happens inside of a confined space. And it allows us to be very targeted with our powder deposition, and allows a few different advantages over our open bed version of the process. Once we are near the top surface, there is a light tamping of the top surface to gain a smooth surface. And then once you're done, basically these are dried in the cavity. And when the drying is complete, the dosage form is ready to be either sealed. So the packaging is already done, or you can actually take them out for any offline testing. This in-cavity printing allows you to still use some of the strategies, such as incorporating different powders or incorporating different print images to have different regions inside of a dosage form, or even having a structure such as the one that you're seeing on the right side that has different regions, maybe an API-free region surrounding an API-containing region. So to really sum up the in-cavity printing, it was a revolution, or it was an evolution of trying to get faster, better, and cheaper, and allowed us to really improve the changeover time and the rapid prototyping capabilities, and also have a lot of impact on scale and process yields and appearance of the dosage forms. But it also, one of the biggest things that we are realizing is that it allows us to use and take the benefit of engineered particles that may have been prepared for different purposes, such as solubility or permeability enhancement, or particles that are coated for release control or taste masking, or APIs that are very sensitive to moistures or heat or pressure that can be very easily handled in this type of format. With this evolution of the process, we're really learning that with the different scales of the machines and also different modes of operating, such as open bed or in cavity printing, we're learning to I guess tackle different unmet needs, both for pharmaceutical scientists that are developing products, or for commercial production of really difficult to make dosage forms. So I'd like to actually wrap up by just quickly recapping some of the lessons that we've learned, and also some of the things that we look forward to, which are one, matching supply with demand really starts with understanding the patient needs. And the location choice really triggers many of the important decisions that needs to be carefully managed. And scaling down of the product development needs really had a lot of parallels to distributed manufacturing and clinical supplies. And finally, with the in-cavity printing, it really provides a different paradigm for scaling up and down and scaling out as well. And most importantly, dealing with unique products to address unmet patient needs, or coming up with different tools to really address unmet needs of pharmaceutical scientists may be really important things for us involved in 3D printing to really consider, so that we can make the biggest impact to the industry. So with that, I would like to conclude the talk, and I don't know if we have some time remaining for some questions.